Hey guys, thanks so much for joining me, Kristin Esparza, on the So She Did podcast. I am excited about today's guest and excited, just kind of doesn't even describe how I feel about today's guest, because the topic that we're going to talk about is bringing us kind of full circle with all of the previous episodes that we've had. We've talked about health, physical health. We've talked about money. We've talked about hypnosis and kind of alternative psychotherapy treatments. And today we are joined by Katharyn Havey. She is a transformative coach and a registered nurse. And the reason that I have her on the show today is because she brings us this balance of talking about our spirituality and who we are. We're going to get into deep discussions about ego and things like that, but she's also got the scientific background of a registered nurse. So very unique guests that we have on today's show. Katharyn, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to get into this conversation.
Yes, I think it's going to be a great one. So before we jump into kind of the topics that you and I have discussed, tell us your story. Tell the listeners your story.
Yeah, so I am a healer from childhood. Like, I feel like people who are in my field, who are nurses, who are healers, like, you have that calling from a young age. And I actually found a journal entry from literally like 2000 when I was like 8 years old. Mm-hmm. And it said, I know what I want to do with my life. I want to be a nurse.
Wow. How lucky for you to have known that. And to your point, it sounds like it was a calling. You wanted to care for other people. And it's funny because I've got a 13-year-old daughter, and she's always been very caring and nurturing and loving too. And I think that there is a specific personality type that has that kind of intuition about what other people need.
Yeah, it is. And it's such a blessing. So I knew that I wanted to be a nurse early on in my life. But the thing was, when I actually went through nursing school and was actually in the hospital at the bedside, it was not what I thought it would be. And this is a conversation I have time and time again with people in my field. It's like, yeah, we wanted to heal, we wanted to help, we wanted to serve, but what it actually looks like as a nurse is not. It's not what we thought we bargained for. Additionally, in the hospital, I developed terrible anxiety, insomnia, depression, GI issues. Like, it was not a good environment for me to be in, but I had so much pride about being a nurse. It felt very, very strong and very purposeful for me to be a nurse. And so I never would have left the hospital had I not gotten fired at the last. So I was a travel nurse. I moved across the country, broke up with my boyfriend, uprooted my life, moved across the country from St. Louis, Missouri to Los Angeles, where I currently live. Mm-hmm. And all for this travel contract. I was so excited. Well, it turns out this hospital and I were just not a match. And I had never had that happen before in my whole career. Every hospital I had ever gone to as a travel nurse wanted to sign me permanently onto staff, but me and this hospital just did not jive. And it was 11 o'clock on a work night. I had worked that day. I'm laying in bed, per usual, having anxiety about having to wake up in the morning. And for me, that looked like racing thoughts, quickened heart rate, heart palpitations sometimes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I just wouldn't be able to fall asleep. So I actually used to have to take Ambien and Xanax to fall asleep at night. I had these prescribed just like it was that bad. So it was really, and it's like so crazy too, that it's like, just to be able to go and do your job, you have to take medication like this just to sleep. So clearly my body was signaling to me for a long time that that was not the right place for me to be. But anyways, I'm laying in bed. My phone rings at 11 o'clock. It's some like Arkansas number or something super random that I didn't recognize. For some reason, I picked it up, and it was my recruiter calling to tell me that my contract had been canceled. And that is polite terms for you've been fired.
Wow. Did she give you a reason?
Yes, so they had written her a whole email. So she starts going down this email of all of these reasons. And, I'm feeling embarrassed. I'm feeling shocked. I'm feeling this level of like shame and like, oh my God, like I did something wrong. But as she's going down this list and something switches in me and I start laughing.
Really?
Like I'm literally laying there in bed on the phone with her laughing and she's like, so you're good? Or she doesn't really know how to receive that. And it was just this moment of like, there is something bigger happening here that I am unaware of, but I am willing to see where this takes me. So that sparked a 2-year journey of healing myself. I really made it my full-time job to heal myself of anxiety, depression, insomnia, GI issues. And it worked.
Wow.
I did it. I actually did it. And now I feel like I can truly actually heal and help people to have their own transformation in the way that I really always wanted to serve with that kind of depth.
Yeah.
But I wasn't able to get through my nursing career. So now that leads up to where I am now.
So let's go back to you're 8 years old, you're 9, 10, 11, you graduate from high school, you go to college, and registered nurses go through quite a bit of formal training and formal education. Yeah. So as you were going through that, did you feel like it was the right thing at the time, or did you just feel like once you started it, you were stuck in it? Talk to me about how you felt early.
Yeah, I knew that it was off. I knew something was off while I was in nursing school, but I also knew something was right. It was like this is right for right now.
I see.
I knew it wasn't, I had never envisioned myself being a bedside nurse for my whole career. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew something bigger.
Something bigger. And so now that you're working as a transformative coach, I think you've been through enough change that you can help guide other people. So in your situation, your job loss was completely unexpected. You had been successful before, you had been successful in other roles, you moved across the country because you had been successful and recruited for this role. Mm-hmm. Now, all of a sudden the universe says, psych, just kidding. And it kind of pushes you out of the nest, if you will, and says, okay, little birdie, you want to help people? Here's how we're going to do this. So
yeah, it was like, you want to help people? Well, you have to help yourself first, and we're going to make you.
Oh, that's powerful. That's powerful. So you had this unexpected job loss. Your initial reaction was laughter. And, at first you were shocked, but then you kind of went into laughing and, okay, this is what it is. But for other people, it's not always that easy. They lose their job, or they lose a spouse, to an extramarital affair, or they lose a family member, somebody dies, or they have to move and they didn't want to do it, or there's financial loss. There's all of these different losses in people's lives. So what advice, when you're working with clients, do you give to them when they're faced with unexpected losses?
Yeah. So I never promote denial of an emotional experience, but it's this sense of like, yes, this is your life right now, this is your life situation, but right now, but let's not confuse your life with your life situation.
So powerful, because what's happening and what you're feeling right now is very real. You can't deny that it hurts, or that it was unexpected or shocking or is causing you anxiety, but how you're feeling right now doesn't have to last forever. Right. So how do you coach people through moving through that while still giving themselves the opportunity to experience it?
Yeah, well, it's about honoring this moment, right? Because this is how life shows up. Mm-hmm. Nothing has ever happened in the past. Nothing has ever happened in the future.
Yeah.
Anything that has ever happened has happened in this moment right now. So it's about honoring, like, what needs to come forth for me right now. Do I need to cry? Do I need to talk to a friend? Do I need to see a therapist? Because coaching and therapy are not the same.
Right.
It's about continually allowing and having just so much compassion for yourself. I believe compassion is the highest form of love that we can give to ourselves and to other people. But particularly when we're dealing with something life altering, it's like having this awareness that, yes, this is what is happening right now, and I'm honoring and I'm in this, but I also know that this isn't it. And pain is transformative. I mean, if you're really being honest with yourself, the times that you, and I like got goosebumps right now, I'm giving myself goosebumps. The times that have been the most difficult in your life are also the times that have been the most transformative and have accelerated you onto your path of where you are now.
Yes. And I think that for most of us, if we're over the age of 25, we've experienced some kind of change in our life that was unexpected. And when we look back and we see we got through that, and now we're on the other side and we're better, not in spite of it, but very often we're better because of it. That realization and that reminder is really, really powerful. There's a book called The Obstacle is the Way. I don't know if you've read it or not, but you can tell by the title exactly what it's about.
The obstacle is the way.
Obstacle is the way, where you go through the challenge, and that actually makes you better. And I know that in the professional realm, this has worked really well for my team, because as you know, people across the country had to adapt to working during COVID. And at first there was this, oh my God, what are we going to do? How are we going to move forward? Business as usual doesn't exist anymore. But you know what? That's correct. Business as usual didn't work anymore. So we're going to do business as now. We're going to change our approach. And, you know, I've shared on the show before, I think I shared with you, I was married for 18 years and I got a divorce, and it wasn't a painful divorce, but it was a huge change in my life. And through that change, I think I've become a better person because I lived through that, and I learned how to move on from relationships, how to build myself as an individual as opposed to part of a couple. And I think that that's extremely powerful. So one of the most powerful lessons I learned through that was that sometimes what we see as a loss is really a gain. And I know that you agree with that too. So talk a little bit more about how your loss became a gain for you.
Yeah, well, I believe that in all circumstances, we can choose to use it for, we just, period. We get to decide how we use things that happen in our life.
Yeah.
So I could have had the decision that I'm not going to lean into this curious feeling, this curious calling, this curious inner knowing that I'm having, that somehow something is unfolding that's supposed to be here. I could have ignored it because honestly, the intuition isn't really that loud. The ego is much louder, and it can, and it does override that inner knowing. And I think that's why people stay stuck, if you will, in certain patterns or careers or relationships, because it's not hard to override that little voice that says, hey, you can do more.
Yeah.
There's more waiting for you.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't go away, but it's easy to mask.
Yeah.
So I think I've had a good intuition or a good relationship with my intuition my whole life. And not that I'm some enlightened master over here, like I'm always following it. I always know what the right thing is to do, because I don't. Mm-hmm. But in that circumstance, in that situation, something just felt right. I was not planning on staying in Los Angeles for more than a few months. Actually, I was going to go to Hawaii for my next contract. So really quite alluring to continue being a travel nurse. But I knew that something was happening, and I decided to stay. So I got a different job as a home healthcare nurse.
Okay.
While going through this, and it was never like I decided that I said, I'm going to have a complete personal and spiritual, mental and emotional transformation. Like it was never a goal like that. It was always a curiosity of like, I'm really interested in this book. It's like a hunger almost. Like,
I was going to say a thirst.
Yeah, it is. It's like, it's feeding some like deep part of myself. And it just never stopped. I just never got sick of learning more, I wouldn't say learning more. I would say forgetting more. I never got sick of forgetting who I was not.
That's a big, powerful shift, because a lot of times we talk about growing, we talk about learning, but you're saying instead of forgetting, of leaving behind, it's unlearning. That's really, really powerful. Mm-hmm. And the first time you and I talked, you said something to me that I thought was wise beyond your years. You said that you can grieve and grow at the same time.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what it is what I was saying about honoring this moment. It's like, yes, I'm honoring my grief. I'm honoring these emotions that are coming up, but I'm also simultaneously growing exponentially from this, that your essence, your true self has room for it all. All things are accepted when you're aligned with your truth, with who you really are.
Mm-hmm. So we've talked a little bit about your story. Now let's talk to the listeners and let's educate a little bit, because one of the things you and I discussed was about living for yourself versus your ego. And, I think ego has been kind of a buzzword. You see it on quotes all the time, things like that over the last 5 years or so. But what exactly is ego? What is that?
Yeah. So entire books have been written on this subject.
Yes.
It is quite comprehensive. Actually, in the online course that I made, this is the first module, is understanding the ego. And I even say in there, like, consider this a comprehensive introduction, but you will always be learning about your ego. I learn more about my ego every single day. Mm-hmm. So what is the ego in a nutshell? It's, to help people identify it, it's the voice in your head. It's the thoughts that you're having when you're not trying to think.
Okay.
In yogic terms, this is known as the samskara. It is our conditioned mind. It's kind of how we see, it's the filter that we're seeing the world in based off of our experiences, traumas, wounds, if you will. And it it really distorts reality. In just kind of, you see things oftentimes that it's little r reality. It's not capital R reality. It's reality that makes sense through that lens of the ego.
So ego would have told you, okay, you lost your job. You should be ashamed. You should be embarrassed. Mm-hmm. Now you need to find another job that's in the same field because you studied this. You committed to everybody that you were going to do this. Mm-hmm. And this is the right thing to do. So ego fits into kind of the social mores and what's expected of people as opposed to their authentic self. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. And I would take that and add to it that many teachers, this is what differs a lot from how I teach and view and relate to my ego than other teachers. And that is that the ego isn't bad. The ego isn't evil.
Yeah.
It's trying to keep you safe. So it's telling me those things because it doesn't want me to experience the pain. The ego is always trying to avoid pain. That is like the main thing. It doesn't want to feel pain, but it doesn't understand that it's the actual source of the pain. By getting you to ignore your intuition, because what happens if you listen to your intuition? You don't know. It's the unknown. It's the void. And really the void is the only place that transformation can occur, that you can create something new. But the ego doesn't want something new. It wants what's familiar because it's dealt with what's familiar and it can deal with it.
And it's
it would much rather you have that chronic background dissatisfaction, discontent, than experience an acute, having an acute experience of a heightened emotion. And it has this misunderstanding that if you experience an emotion like that, you will never not experience that emotion. Like if you go into it, if you go into the feeling, if you go into the emotion, then it's like, well, everything's gonna just come out and explode and you're never gonna be okay. And it's like, I'm not you're always going to like be in this, and the just like tsunami wave of the emotion, but it's just 180 degrees away from the truth.
Well, I like your approach. I like your approach that says the ego is not bad, because I did read this quote once, and I'm sure you've seen it at some point or another, that says, starve the ego, feed the soul. And in my mind, the ego and the soul are both part of me. They're both part of me. And so are there parts of the ego that sometimes need to be set aside? Yes. And there are parts of my soul that need to be fed? Yes. But on the flip side, my ego has made me successful. It has provided me with drive. It has pushed me forward. So I don't want to starve that part of myself at the expense of, I want to feed them both in a way that's healthy and that's productive, and that brings out a wholeness in me that's both grounded and that's introspective, not something that's one or the other, because I don't think we have to be A or B. We can be A through Z and have this full experience of life and reality and humanity and soulfulness.
Yes. The only one who doesn't have room for it all is the ego.
Yeah.
Or essence has room for it all. And it's really deciding who is in the driver's seat today.
Right.
Because you can have a healthy, integrated ego that's still in the car.
Yes.
They're just not driving the show. They're just not the one making all of the decisions. And when it comes up, when that, maybe it takes the form of self-doubt, or maybe it takes the form of procrastination, like underneath those things, there's such a beautiful intention of the ego. Like with self-doubt, well, the ego wants to keep you safe. With procrastination, the ego wants you to rest. It's like changing our relationship with these aspects of the ego and saying, thank you, I hear you. And then you are making the decision from your aligned place. The ego is not driving the car.
Yes, I like that word aligned, from that aligned place. And I like that you reference the ego. You've given it almost this personified exterior thing you're talking to. It's not, okay, I feel myself thinking this, I hear myself thinking that. You're saying, okay, no, this is the ego. And when you can identify within yourself those separate parts of yourself, then you can bring them into alignment, because you're not just, buried by emotion. You're not just buried by soulfulness. You're not ingrained in only the physical world. You have all of those pieces together to make the whole you. And so I think there comes a time where we have to say, you know what, this is my ego talking. And then other times where we have to say, you know what, my soul is telling me this, but realistically, I need to do this. I do need to listen to the ego today. And I don't think we starve one at the expense of the other. Sometimes we may, feed one and then the next day feed the other. But I think we have to take care of both of them and recognize both sides of that coin. Like I said, not A or B, A through Z. Let's make ourselves whole human beings, body, mind, spirit, soul. So how do we go about, we talked about the ego, how do we go about finding the other side, that authentic version? Who am I? And let me tell you a story, because I've worked with a life coach now for about 3 years. And one of the things that I'm really good at, it's why I have this show, it's why I've been successful professionally, is because I am very, very good at positive self-talk. Okay. I can talk myself out of any situation. I can tell myself that I'm great. I can tell myself that we're going to charge right through and be successful. And I am a driver of success. And when I find myself slipping into places of anxiety or sadness, things like that, I will immediately start reading, positive, uplifting things, talking to myself, realigning myself with where I think I should be, with where the ego thinks I should be. That's
what I was going to say.
Yes, where the ego thinks I should be. So one night I was laying in my bed and I had had a shitty week. And so I get this book out and I'm reading, it's called the Motivation Manifesto. And I'm, telling myself all of these things that I always do. Close the book, set it down on my nightstand, turn off the light. And I felt completely empty. And I told my coach the next morning that I had this huge epiphany for myself that, I've heard the phrase recently, toxic positivity, that I was almost motivating myself and talking to myself at the expense of actually experiencing how I felt in the moment. Because my tendency is to drive. And so as soon as I feel like I've lost control of the steering wheel, my ego says, get back in the driver's seat, girl, take control. But I never pull off to the side of the road and have that moment to say, you know what? Nobody can drive for 24 hours. Some of us need some rest. So it was really powerful for me. And it's something I'm still learning. Yeah. How do those of us who are driven and motivated and all of those things take time and actually hear what it is our soul is trying to tell us?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. You have to be still.
Yeah.
Stop. You have to pause and allow these aspects of yourself to come out.
I think it's hard. It's harder than
yeah. No, it's so hard because the ego does not want you to look within. It wants to stay in control, because what happens when you are looking within, when you're saying, okay, why don't you take a break? You can sit in the passenger side. You can still be here, but I'm going to drive. Essence is going to drive. Your true self is going to drive. Well, the ego, it loses its control, or its perceived control on the situation. And it doesn't realize that by surrendering, by what it would say as losing control, that is how you find yourself. Yeah. Because you yourself is always here. It never left. Mm-hmm. So it's that unlearning. It's like when people say, I'm going to find myself, or I can't find myself. It's like, well, you have to stop looking, because looking, trying to strategize, and well, if I meditate this many hours, and if I read this many books, and if this is how I go about life, then I'll be present. And it's like, no,
right.
Stop that.
Right.
There's nothing that you have to get that's outside of yourself to be yourself.
I think there are so many women that are going to hear this and that are going to hear that message, because to your point, what we do is we sign up for the yoga class, we buy the books, we create a checklist of things that we are going to do to get in touch with ourselves. And it becomes outside of ourselves, because we haven't learned, and I'm guilty of this too, how to be still. Because, for me, as a single mom with 3 kids, from the time I wake up until the time I go to bed, I'm go, 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 go. Yeah. And as soon as I have a break, I'm on social media, or I am reading a book, or I haven't learned yet how to turn my brain off. Mm-hmm. So I know that meditation is a practice that people use to turn their brain off. Is that something that you use?
Yeah, I definitely use meditation. When you are in that go, go, go mindset, energy field, it's not just a mindset, it's really a physiological experience, because that is your sympathetic nervous system. That's your fight, flight, or freeze response. So there really is like biological, physiological things that are happening within your body. So no, it's not just like you can shut your brain off and you can like come back and like feel fine and it's good. Like you only need 5 minutes. I would never say that.
Yeah.
So what I teach, some practical tools for when you're in those times is, so I teach breath work. This is something that I teach in my course that I mentioned earlier. This is actually this is part of the second module, and it's so early on in the course because when I learned breath work, it was so transformative for me, because that's literally how you control your nervous system. When you're in that heightened place, you can manipulate the breath in certain ways. That's not difficult. It's very easy, very attainable, to signal to your brain and your nervous system to stop releasing the cortisol, to lower the heart rate, to lower the blood pressure. And believe me, the ego will try to get you to not do it.
I know.
For some reason, it just feeds off of that like frantic energy. It's like, yeah, give me more of this chaos. It's like weirdly addicted to the chaos. And
it is addicted to chaos. I am so glad that you said that, and you validate my experience with the ego, because that is what happens. It is addicted to the chaos. And recently, I have a teenage son. He's a freshman in college this year, and he told me, because I work out, that I should get an Apple Watch. So I go and buy this Apple Watch, thinking, again, I'm addicted to chaos, right? I'm going to track my heartbeat, and I'm going to track how many miles and how many steps, and it's going to be right there. And what I loved about it that I did not expect is every so often it would send me a message to my arm that says, take a breath.
Oh.
And the first time I looked at it, I was like, what the hell does this watch? I don't have time to breathe.
Right.
Literally my first thought, I don't have time to breathe. I'm in the middle of a meeting right now. And then I thought, I don't have time to breathe.
Yes.
Really?
Like, who doesn't have time to breathe?
Yeah. So I started to do it. And I'm actually really grateful now when it triggers me, because it reminds me, you need to breathe, Kristin. You've got to take a minute, get up from your desk, take a walk, go to the bathroom, for God's sake, give yourself a second and just be a human, just be there. And one of the questions I've learned to ask myself when the reminder comes up is, how do you feel right now? And my coach suggested that I start asking myself that whenever it just comes to my mind, just stop for 30 seconds and ask myself, what are you feeling? Am I feeling hurried? Am I feeling rushed? Am I feeling calm? Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling anxious? What am I feeling in that moment? And that has helped me, at least, even if I don't do anything about the feeling, become more cognizant of how I am feeling. And then I can notice patterns, because I've never thought of myself as a person with anxiety. I've never thought of myself as an anxious person until every time that little trigger comes up and I ask myself how I feel, I kind of feel like I have anxiety.
Yeah.
And then I notice this pattern. I have it again. I didn't know that about myself. And so it's actually caused me, I need to reduce my caffeine intake and things like that. But it brought awareness to me. The breathing that you mentioned is so powerful. So for the listeners out there hearing this, take a second and just breathe.
Yeah. And just notice what is going on inside your body. I was actually doing a podcast interview the other day, and I said something to that effect, like, just sitting and noticing, like what's here. And the person said something like, yeah, that sounds like very spiritual. That kind of sounds like Buddhism, or like blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And I thought how interesting it is that just being with yourself could be considered weird or strange or different. It's like, what could be more natural? What could be more organic? What could be more normal in like the true sense of the word? Like, it's yourself, just being with yourself.
Yeah. And I think, I had a hypnotist on the show on the episode right before yours, that we talked a lot about the conscious mind and how it is a shared experience. So to us, I think in Western civilization, it sounds like it's a Buddhist theory, or it sounds like meditation or something, but all major religions have some aspect of meditation, of prayer, of getting in touch with a higher being. And even for somebody who doesn't believe in God or a higher being or a state of nirvana, we all still have the common experience that when we are silent, when we are alone, there is an awareness that we are more than just what we do. And that is universal across all religions and non-religions. It is a human experience. Be still, be quiet, and you have that voice inside of you telling you what you feel and what you think, and outside of the world.
Yeah. And I think I wasn't even going to try to take the conversation this way, but this just popped into my awareness that a lot of people will confuse that inner knowing and that still small voice. And I've heard it called the still small voice of God, but you can call
it's a biblical term. The still small voice is a biblical term. Yeah.
But it's universal.
Right.
But people will confuse that with the ego, and then they have a difficult relationship with their intuition. They'll say like, well, I don't trust my intuition because it says this and da, da, da. And I say, well, because that's not your intuition.
Yeah.
If it's coming from any kind of lack or any kind of fear or anxiety, that's not your intuitive voice. The intuitive voice, the Course in Miracles actually says the ego speaks first and the ego speaks loudest.
It does.
Being able to create that space. And that's what meditation is. It's just creating space between you and your ego, which sometimes it feels like you're like so freaking glued to it. It's like you can't separate yourself from that. And that's why we have the spiritual practices like breath work. I like to use breath work in conjunction with meditation. And prayer too. Prayer is powerful. Prayer is transformative, and it creates that gap in the stream of thought that allows your essence to come through. And that's why it feels so good to do these practices.
Right. Right. So where in our lives do you think there is a place for ego? Because we've talked about setting it aside a little bit, and you and I agree that it's not all bad. So where is that place for ego in our lives?
Yeah, well, I think it's about just changing the relationship in your everyday life with your ego. And like I said, I learn more about my ego every day, and it's constantly being present and being aware of like, I'm simultaneously having this, whatever form it's taking, this fear, this anxiety, or this self-doubt, or this perfectionism or people pleasing. Like
Yes.
I see this pattern. I also see how it's serving me. I see how it has served me at some point in my life. I understand why it's here. So thank you, ego, for trying to help me. I'm seeing that, and I'm also simultaneously choosing a different path.
Yes. And I think that it could be a very powerful practice to almost write a letter to your ego. And I love what you just said. Thank you, ego, for showing me this. And this is the part of the message that I'm choosing to receive. And this is the part that I'm making a conscious decision to set aside. I don't want to be a nurse anymore, but I still want to help people. Things like that,
Yeah. And I also want to touch on something that we originally talked about. What is the divine curriculum?
Yes.
And
that's on my list for you. So let's jump into it. What is that? Because you told me that you have a divine curriculum, and just the name of it gets me so excited. So tell me, what is the divine curriculum that you're talking about?
Well, I would say the reason it gets you excited is because like, you're like, oh, this is true. This makes sense. You're like, I see that. And that's how you know that something true, when it just like hits like that. So the divine curriculum in a lot of ways manifests as ego. Like the ego, your triggers. I think triggers are beautiful because it shows you your next most intelligent step in your healing path. And that's what transformation is. That's what a spiritual path is. It's not like, oh, I feel so good every day. Like, no, there's like lows. Like you got to go in the valley to get on the mountaintop.
Amen.
And sometimes you got to go through a lot of valleys to get on the mountain.
Right. Sometimes you have to go through the desert before you even get to the foothills of the mountains. Let's be clear.
Exactly. But it's like holding that space and simultaneously knowing that you are on the mountain.
Yes.
At the same time, it's like you can be in two places, and it's the merging of this. So the divine curriculum, it's not just like your purpose, although I think that is also interwoven. But it's like, what is unfolding before me right now in this conversation? What is being activated in myself? What is being shifted? What am I learning through this experience, through this day? The spiritual person on a, well, I don't want to say spiritual person because we all are spiritual people, but the consciously spiritual person on the spiritual path looks for the lessons in every situation.
Yes.
It's like, it's a constant learning and unlearning. It's like, this is what's true. And like, oh, I noticed that I had this emotional reaction to this situation. And it's like, why did I have that reaction? And not even why did I have it, but what aspect of me had that reaction? Is there healing that I can do for this aspect? Is there something that I've been overlooking or that I haven't realized?
I appreciate that you keep saying learning and unlearning. And one of the things that I truly believe is that sometimes I believe that truth is not fixed. So what we learn at one point may serve us really well at a
Yeah.
certain point in our life. And then we have to unlearn that because we have evolved to a different place, or we've moved to a different place. So I love that you look at both flip sides of the coin and you say, it's not only about learning, it's about unlearning the things that no longer serve you, not because they aren't good, but that practice, that habit, that mentality no longer serves me in my life. And it's okay to unlearn something that used to be productive.
Yeah.
It's okay to let go. And I think that letting go is so powerful too.
Yeah. And it's like, I think I'm glad that you said no longer serves me, because I feel like that is kind of a trendy word, and like, well, this doesn't serve me anymore. Like that can definitely be used as you go, well, you know, like that feels just like that kind of like superiority. This doesn't serve me anymore. And that is another thing I mentioned when we first talked, is like new level, new devil.
I love that too.
You evolve, so does the ego. The ego is as smart as you. Your mind is as smart as you.
Right.
So its verbiage changes, you know, so it might say, this doesn't serve me, but in reality, that's a trigger that is very well serving you in that moment.
Yeah.
And you really need to look into that and see what that's actually all about, because that has some valuable wisdom for you.
And I love when you said new level, new devil, because we are always learning, we are always growing, and you are a transformative coach, but transformation isn't a caterpillar that becomes a butterfly and flies away and lives happily ever after. Transformation is an ongoing, continuous process. So how do you define transformation? What are your thoughts about transformation as a lifelong process?
Yeah. So a concept that I always teach about transformation is that there's a difference between change and transformation. Mm-hmm. Change is transient. You can change a behavior, you can modify a behavior, whatever, you can change a perspective, but it's temporary. Transformation is permanent. Now, I'm not saying that it's permanent, like you transform and now you're an enlightened master, but it's like, I used a Pokemon example the other day when I was talking about this, and I'm probably going to say the names wrong, but it's like Charizard can't go back to Charmander or whatever it is. You can only keep evolving. So it's like you're never done. Mm-hmm. You've never just arrived at, I guess enlightened masters, which there have been enlightened masters throughout our history, Jesus, Buddha. But I am certainly not an enlightened master. And I would say I am on a very conscious spiritual path, and constantly in my learning, in my development, in my reading. So transformation is like, it's so beautiful. I get addicted to healing. I'm like, how happier can I be? How much more joyful can I be? It's like constantly just, and it can be used for the ego.
It can. Okay.
It can. It's a very fine line, and really only you know the difference, because it can be like, well, how happy was I today? Let's rate this happiness. And then,
I see. Yes.
You see, it's subtle. It's very subtle. But when it comes from this expansive place of like, oh, I'm so excited to learn more about who I truly am. I'm so excited to forget these old limiting beliefs. I'm so excited to heal these aspects of myself. I'm so excited to be just this pure vessel of love and compassion. How can I be more loving towards myself and others? I think
what's interesting that you said is, it can feed the ego by saying, how happy am I today? Am I happier than I was yesterday? But the goal isn't necessarily to be happier. It's more to be aware of where you are and to honor where you are in that moment, be it more or less happy. And I think that very often, especially again, in this society that we live in, happiness is the goal, right? We go online and we post pictures of our happy moments and not our sad moments. And then even then, when you see people post pictures of the sad moments, I think, well, that's ego driven because you want attention for your tears, Mm-hmm. But where are we really when the phone is off, the camera is off, the TV's off? To my point, when I close the book, I put the book on my nightstand, the lights are off, and I'm in bed by myself. How do I feel? Who am I? How am I growing? How am I becoming a better version of me that's not going to make me happier, but that's going to make me more whole
and more true, just more
be.
authentic.
Yeah.
Like that's what it is. It's just,
yes,
it's about being authentic and that is the honoring in whatever is unfolding in this moment. And even as I'm saying this, it's like, I still struggle with it. I still have my off days. Again, not an ascended master over here, but it's about having these tools to course correct. It's just course correcting and being gentle, being compassionate, taking the position of the loving parent for all of the parts of you. Everything is accepted here. You get to be a beginner. You get to quote unquote fail, what the ego would call failure. The essence would never call something failure. Because everything, we can choose to use everything for our highest good.
Yes. So if somebody's listening to this show right now and they're saying, I want transformative change, but I have no idea where to begin. I don't even know who I am. Where does this person start?
Yeah. So that is the whole reason I created the course that I created. It's called Creating Peace. It's a 4-month personal spiritual transformation. And it's really essentially just everything that I learned over my 2 years of healing and beyond in my coaching relationships, my coaching containers, put into an online course. Now, that is not the only way. Some people will feel called and excited to do something like that. Other people will be called in a different way. All of our paths look different, but there are a couple books that I recommend for everyone, especially if you're brand new on a healing path, or really even not even brand new. These are just really dope books. So there's The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. That was actually the first book that I read on my path that really started opening me up. And any book by Eckhart Tolle is just sends me. I actually have A New Earth right here.
And then there's The Power to Now.
Yeah, it's up there. And it's like, I can read this again and again and again. And depending on where I am in my journey, it hits different. Something else comes out to me.
They're not books. I don't think Eckhart Tolle's books are books that I can sit and read. I have to process them. Sometimes I can only make it through a paragraph, and then I have to just stop and think and breathe.
Yeah, and I love that. I think it's like, that's really fits into how I enjoy doing my spiritual practices. But healing looks different. What I would say is follow your light. This is something that I teach when it is talking about like decision making. If it feels expansive, if it feels interesting, if you have a curiosity, just follow the curiosity. Like worst case scenario, you learn some things and you leave what, quote unquote, doesn't serve you. It's like, it's not one thing that would be a perspective of the ego, that like this book or this course is it's everything. It's like, no, this is a spiritual gym, just like in the physical gym. When you reach your ideal body shape or weight or muscle mass, like you still have to keep going.
Yeah. And just because something resonated with somebody else and everybody's reading or recommending something doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily resonate with you at that time in your life. And I think that's okay too.
Exactly. Yeah. And at that time of your life is a really good point too. Everybody's entry points to spirituality is different. I am so proud of this course that I've made, but I also completely honor if someone is like, I'm so interested in this other way of healing. It's like, great. Then follow that, because that is your expansiveness. That's your intuition. That is the physical experience of intuition, is that expansiveness, is that lightness.
Yeah. You mentioned A Course in Miracles earlier, and I probably tried to read it about 20 years ago. And when I first got it,
I have all of these books like right next to me.
When I first got it, I thought, okay, is this heretical? Like, what is this? This doesn't work. And again, I lived in the South at the time. And so I was, very consumed and surrounded by religion. And I actually took the book back because I thought, okay, this book just does not align with anything I've been taught. And now here I am 20 years in the future, and I bought it about 2 years ago, and I've read through it, and I think it aligns with everything I've been taught. So it just depends on where you are in your own personal journey, how open you are to hearing and seeing things that are not exactly what you've heard before, but looking to see where they fit. And do I subscribe to every idea and every book out there? Absolutely not.
Right.
But if I can get something from that, then that was worth it for me in that moment. So how can our listeners find your course? How can they get in touch with you?
Yes, my Instagram, really everything is pretty much the same. It is Katharyn, Katharyn. It's spelled a little weirdly, _ Suzanne, SUZANNE. So that goes for Instagram, email KatharynSuzanne@gmail.com. My website is KatharynSuzanne.com. My course will be listed on my website as soon as it's done going under construction. But hopefully by the time your readers or your listeners actually, that will happen.
Yeah.
Completed at that point. So I would love to have, I love having spiritual conversations. I love serving. I love offering guidance. Please email, send me a DM and Instagram. I would love to support you in any way that I can.
Okay. So before we end the episode today, what's the big idea you want the listeners to walk away with? The big idea.
Oh man, we covered a lot of ground.
You did.
We covered a lot of ground. And it's like, I don't want to be cliche, but in just the truest sense of the word, you can do it.
You can do it.
You can do it. You can literally, you're not stuck.
Yeah.
Being stuck is of the ego. Not knowing is of the ego. You know what is your lightness. Follow that lightness.
I love it. And I think that's a great message. So for all the listeners out there, you can do it. You heard it from Katharyn today. You can do it. You can balance the ego. You can balance your soul. You can balance your spirit. It's a process. You can make transformative change. You can learn more about yourself and the world around you. And you can find a path to happiness no matter where you are in your life right now. And if you look and you hear the beginning of Katharyn's story, she started with this career, this education. She was ready. She knew exactly what path was before her until the universe said, just kidding, you're going down a different path. And it surprised her with something that was even better. And she
way beyond my wildest dreams.
Yeah.
So much more fulfilling than I ever could have imagined.
Yes. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show today. And we'll talk soon.
Yes. Thank you so much.